Hello, Stefania.
Hello,
How are you?
fine. And you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm definitely gonna get started into the main topic. So we have with us Stefania. Stefania is the director of AI in biotech. She joined Women for Ethical AI UNESCO in 2024 and serves as an expert in AI and contributing to ethical and responsible AI initiatives. Currently serves as consultant in AI, machine learning, and UX design, and is also a Google Women Tech Maker. So we're really happy to have you with us today. And so before we get started, even if I did this little intro, why don't you tell us, Stefania, a little bit more about yourself and your background and how you got, to where you are today?
My background is an atypical background, we can say. I started with a bachelor degrees in foreign languages, and at some point I was like, okay, I can speak several languages, but maybe there are different ways to make sure that we can communicate without having a bachelor degree. And that's where I started to explore natural language processing. It was something new in my country, in Italy. Things were just getting started. So I did a thesis about machine translation and languages. And then I went to France to have my master, where I learned another language, a programming language. It was very hard compared to the other languages that I learned before, but it was very interesting to see how sometimes we are very complex as humans and we need to explain to machines that are simple how to do stuff. And I kept going. At some point, I had the occasion to work with an e-commerce company, especially for the sentiment analysis part for their users. And I went back to Italy to work in automation. So as you might see, I explore different industries. It's something that I really, really like. And I decided to keep going with a PhD in NLP and computer science. And I was still in France at the time. And I was like, okay, I would like, however, to explore more, also geographically speaking. And I was able to obtain fund for Canada, for NRC, and the University of Ottawa, where I did my postdoc in mental health and artificial intelligence. And then pandemics. I was like, okay, is there anything else that I would like to do in case tomorrow we will not be there anymore? And there was just one industry that I really love to explore. It was a game industry. So for I think almost 4 years, I worked in the game industry as a data scientist, and I worked into different projects because the good part of the game industry is that there are a lot of different departments. So it was like I was able to apply artificial intelligence into different sources. It was very good, very good. And then I went back to my origin, so more on the healthcare industry. And right now I'm working here in Montreal, more on the oncology part. So as you might see, my path was not the typical one, but for sure it was a fun one.
Yeah, it's definitely, we all have different paths, and it's interesting to hear your story. So thank you for sharing that with us. So I mean, obviously, AI could mean different things in different contexts, and I think today we're, mainly going to focus on NLP, natural language processing. So if you had to summarize a little bit what this means for those who are joining that are less technical, how would you describe it?
Okay, we can say that basically NLP is the father or what you are now using as ChatGPT or any other technology of this sort. NLP is basically started when there were people from more linguistic background that started to work with more IT people, computer scientist people, mathematical people, and they tried basically to describe languages in a way that was simple for the description itself, but also in order to put it then in a machine. So from there, it's a very long journey because I think the first works were in the is so a lot of years of work until at some point in 21, 22, we can say that this part has been shown to the world through things like ChatGPT. So it's basically how we can understand languages and replicate and generate languages through a machine.
Very interesting. So I just want to remind, since not everybody joined right at the start, so I just want to remind everybody that you can ask your questions, by the way, in the chat in the questions tabs at any time during the session, even though I have lots of questions already for Stefania. Please, this is interactive, so please go ahead. Also, so I can see that you have obviously experience in different industries, and the topic today is really about, how is AI applicable or how to use it basically in different areas in different industries. So how about we start with, product management or management in general? How would you say that NLP can benefit or make us more productive, I guess?
Okay, so it's an interesting question. It can be replied from several points of view. For sure, especially when you are, for example, in an industry that works very, very fast, when you work with production and product managers, they want for sure to understand what is happening around their product. It might be something like having feedback almost in real time about their product. It might be something more related to the competitor. And sometimes manager, usually they have a lot of meetings and they have to decide. They are always in a rush and so on. So one of the things that I was able to build at some point was a sort of summarization tool. It was also even before ChatGPT. So there are some techniques for sure on NLP that help us make sure that we can summarize documents. So I might enter a little more into the detail without being too much technical. But basically what I did, there were basically two types of models. There was a model that was called extractive model, and the other was the abstractive model. Probably people here in this webinar knows more about the abstractive one because it's similar to what ChatGPT do. So basically, you take the information from the source, our documents, for example. For managers, could be feedback from users or, meeting notes, something like that. So basically, we create another text from those documents that can be summarized for the user. And the words will be not identical. They will be similar. They will just a human will do. So it's a summarization. The extractive sometimes is preferred, especially if you work in companies that are more, they need to observe more laws and make sure that everything that is done is traceable. So, for example, lawyers. In the extractive way, you will just take some portion of the text and you will report them as a summarization. So basically, you can really see the connection between the summarized document and the source document. So it's also a sort of trust. I don't know the word. It's important for the user to understand why some parts are summarized and other not. So this is one of the things that can be applied in the management setting. Of course, there are other things that might be done. It all depends also in which type of industry you are.
That's very good. So we already have a question from one of our guests here, so I'm just going to go ahead. Would like to know your perspective on AGI. Is it coming very soon? A long way to go? Will it be beneficial or worse for society, especially ethical and privacy? Data part, will we continue to see many jobs replaced by AI? And how can we better prepare? What skills to learn not to be replaced by AI? Okay, so there's a lot of questions. How about we track back a little bit? What's your perspective on AGI? Is it coming very soon or is it a long way to go?
So I think I will try to reply to this question as a whole because everything is so connected and I can see some sort of fear, which is totally normal. So honestly, something that I always say, and this has been since I think 2015, 10 years ago almost, AI is a tool. So we should not be worried to be replaced by AI, for sure. One thing that I truly believe is that as a tool, it will modify how we do some stuff. But it has always been the case for every new tool up there. The usual example is Excel. Before Excel, people were doing their statistics and their calculus in a different way. But now those people have always their job. but they are using a new tool. For sure, people that will not adapt to these new tools will have probably a hard time to get a job on the long term. But again, I think it's not a question of artificial intelligence, it's really adaptability for every type of a situation in the workplace. Is it true that there are some companies or some influencers that are pushing these ideas that we will be replaced or there will be negative consequences? As every tool, I also believe that, again, the tool is neutral. The use that we do or we decide to do is the real problem. So maybe we should start to think more about, as a user or as a people that will be impacted by that, how we can protect ourselves. And that's why there are a lot of discussion, if we see also at UNESCO, around how we can be critical with those tools and how we can also improve the literacy in order to make sure that people will not be, we can say, dehumanized when they use these kind of tools. I will just reread the question. Okay, so I will say, I don't think there will be we see some jobs that are replaced by AI. We should also consider that there are a lot of companies, and that's a personal opinion, that are doing some choices right now. And I don't think they have the old vision for the long term. So they are doing some choices without thinking twice of how much is sustainable, the choices they're doing, especially when they replace people with AI.
Where do you see, for example, this happening? When you say that some of these choices are being made, where do you see this happening? In what area, what sector?
I would say it's mostly, so if I look at, for example, the manufacturing area, is it something that it's common, but it was common also 10 years ago, because they're always searching for automation. For sure, there are
this is definitely, I was going to say, a trend that's been existing already.
There are other domains where, for example, instead of thinking about using AI as a way to increase our productivity or creativity, we think that we can replace the person behind those skills. So for sure, on the short term, it works. We can build a beautiful chatbot with beautiful personalities. I don't think, honestly, that in the long term it will work a lot. Because one thing that that's the important part of literacy, really. One thing that we usually need to understand is that AI, as any machine learning tool and so on, it works with patterns. So what it sees, it can replicate. So there is the human part that cannot be replicated, and it's really the human feature of being creative. Think about outside of the box without losing the logical part. So I will reframe. I can understand, especially for people that are living right now, this part of the AI that is exploding. As a researcher, I was also concerned, honestly, when I saw tools like ChatGPT being outside and being used, because some things for me are like normal. I understand how they work. I understand the limits. I will not think about a chatbot to be a friend. I will say, okay, it's just a tool that will reply through data. So I can totally understand the fear, because it takes time to make sure that we don't see tools that speaks like us, but they are still tools. So it takes a lot of time to make sure that we do the difference. But I believe that things will change, for sure. They are already changing. I don't believe that in the long term we will all be replaced by AI. That's for sure. And I think I didn't reply to, okay, how can we better prepare? Okay. So I think the thing that you are here today is already a good approach, because you are trying to understand how things work, how you can understand quickly what are the skills that maybe you can improve or learn. And the takeaway is always the same: be curious without judging. Make sure to understand, okay, there are a lot of tools. Even if you don't code, or if you code, that's even better. But try to understand what are the trends of the market and why there are some tools that have been used more than others. And probably there will be a part of those tools that are near to what you are doing or what you love to do. And try to, at that point, know more in depth why they exist, how they work, how many types, who is using them. This will help you to understand and to prepare for those skills, but at the same time, you will understand also the company vision when they use those tools. Are they aligned with your vision? Is it something that you would like to prepare for, or would you like to prepare for other type of vision that still use AI, but they are more aligned to what you would like to do?
That's good. That's definitely a good answer. Thank you for sharing. And actually, I have some additional questions to that. For example, we're talking about using it to summarize information, but does it do it efficiently? And is it the right summary every time? Do we have any kind of due diligence we need to do about these summaries? With your experience with these AI tools, tell us a little bit more about your thoughts on that.
That's a very lovely question.
We want to keep you on your toes today, Stefania.
Yeah. Okay, so I will say in the majority of cases, especially some big tools out there, they will do a very good job in summarize the document you are submitting them. The only thing is that it all depends also on the type of document. So if you, for example, use a document or some sort of topic that is not really discussed all around the world, especially if you use a tool that will not give you the transparency, the source, how it is resonating in a way that can give you some replies, I will say this is the part where you should pay attention. Because in this case, you will see some things that are not corrected, some things that are omitted. We always think about that. We should think about that every model has a sort of bias that might be an error, or it might be over evaluation of some classes instead of others. I will say, and before that, there is also another aspect. When we summarize a document or anything, especially if we use a pre-built tool, we need to make sure that the document we are summarizing will stay in our hands. It will not go into the hands of the company that are using this built-in tool to summarize. Why I say this? Because again, we need to be responsible user. We need to make sure that what we want to do is aligned to what we receive. And at the same time, we don't want to feed models with data that maybe should not be there. Otherwise, in general, one thing that I can say that I'm really happy about that is that, however, also for tools that are well known, we start to see sources. So how these points are created, are generated. I also worked in a system where not only I had the source, but I also had a sort of threshold and probability score to understand why some choices have been made by the tool when get to some replies. I would prefer those kind of tools. For sure, they're not easy to build. They're not even easy to use as an external user. We have always this threshold between data scientists and user people that need to take care of the design.
Actually, that's a good point, and it kind of maybe leads to a question here that we have in the question window from our attendees. What are privacy concerns as it relates to business operations? Should we be aware of when using ChatGPT or similar models, how to protect, I guess, this what you mentioned, right? There are certain things you don't want to feed to the model. So what are some of the best practices that you recommend?
So it depends on commercial tools for sure, and you have to work with lawyers and make sure that every part of the contract you do is aligned with what you expect. So they can make sure that you have some protection in terms of how you can use the tool itself. I will say it's probably if you go into that direction, so big tools that require contracts and so on, you are working inside a company that is big enough to have those tools in a way that can sustain on the long term.
You mean like a private instance of ChatGPT, right? Is what you're referring to versus using like the public ChatGPT.
Exactly.
Definitely the public ChatGPT, you don't put any private information there, right?
Yeah, and if you notice in the last year, we had more and more chatbots that are public that display the warning like, hey, don't put anything because it might be used. So I'm very happy that we have now this display warning there. So yeah, I mean, for commercial use or like as a normal user surfing the internet, we should pay attention to what we do, to what we feed these models. We need to understand that these models that are publicly available, they are publicly available for a reason. Right now we have a constant fight for the best tool out there. So it's also in their interest to make sure that they can stay updated. They can also not only stay updated with the topics out there, but also to make sure that they can understand how the user thinks, so that they can also update with some feature the user will like, so that they can, of course, use those tools more and more. So it's always a think about how the business work. In terms of other things that we might do, again, if we are in a company, let's work with lawyers, let's work also with IT. They can do a lot with cybersecurity. And we should trust IT about that. If we have data scientists or any more technical people inside the company, we can start thinking about a private and local model that we can deploy, so that it will stay inside the company, inside our infrastructure, and we know what enters the model, what will be outputted, and how we can update it, especially in a way that will not hurt users at the very end.
Very important points for sure, for sure. NLP often is used to understand, behavior and preferences and even predict what we might want or what we could purchase next. But, how well does it really know us and how well can it really predict? I'd like to hear your thoughts about that.
I will say pretty well, especially right now because we get used to be analyzed. So it's like I remember how long ago it was, before pandemics. People were like scared because, oh my god, my TV is listening to me. And now right now we have all sort of devices that are listening to us. But apart from that, I think they work very well, especially if you have data that is well prepared and you have enough data. I worked in companies where basically I implemented a solution to make sure that we were able to, first of all, listen to users. When you have a lot of users, it's really hard to make sure that you can listen to them, to each one of them. So when I worked with that company, I was able to make sure that we listen to the big voices, so the big patterns in the data, but also to give the space to minority categories so that they could, however, express their opinion about the product and we could make them happy. It's not something new. Data science in general usually does this kind of things. Recommendation systems have been working for a lot of time right now. So I would say they work in the majority of case. The only thing that I probably sometimes I'm concerned, again, data, a lot of patterns, what is happening outside of those patterns, how we can make sure that everybody is listening to.
And actually, if we want to get just a little bit more technical, for those on the call who are maybe a little bit more technical, what are some of the key components of a transformer-based architecture in NLP?
Wow, we are going to the technical one. I think this question is interesting, especially for what we have just said, because one of the tools that I used to make sure that I was able to understand users was BERT, which is a transformer, a bidirectional transformer. So if we want to make things simple, it's like having a system that is divided into two parts. You will have a part that basically what it does is that it is the encoder part. It will basically process the input sequence, so what we write, basically. It will process it word by word, and it will try to understand and to generate some expressions that have the probability to be written after. And then we will have the decoder. So the decoder will use all the information from the encoder and it will generate finally those tokens that we usually see. And this is what usually happens also with ChatGPT, Gemini, and so on. So basically, if we think about, I will tell something that is very funny about that. I had the chance to teach transformers to ladies. Basically, they were 8 years old. So very hard to be very technical about on that age. But I said one thing. So when we are children, we usually need to learn the alphabet. So we will repeat the alphabet. So the question was, if I say A, B. What you will say next?
C.
C. Okay. And basically is how these kind of models will work. They will try to predict the most probable token, word, letter after what they have already read. And then they will will generate the reply. And that's also why, especially some years ago, we had some weird generated concept because there was not enough data, so they will try to create patterns. They were not exactly what we expected as humans, but right now they work pretty well. And concerning transformers in general, they are also trained a lot extensively. It depends on the type of task, so you have different type of task. But usually one of the things that we usually do is to mask one word at a time. So we will train the model to make sure that they can predict what is that next word.
That's good. I mean, it brings me back to trying to teach the alphabet to my daughter. You know, I have a very young daughter, and I've sung ABC songs more times than we can count. But what are some of the ways you can customize your own pre-trained NLP? Also, you know, it's one of the things about training it. For sure, that's important. But also, you know, with a custom NLP, are you able to influence it, teach it new things? How does that work?
So it depends. There are several things that we can do to make sure that our model is customized. We can basically modify a pre-trained model. So in simple terms, we will try to preserve the knowledge of that pre-trained model, and we will only delete a little portion of the knowledge to inject new knowledge. The new knowledge is basically our topic, our domain, what we are using this model to. So everything that is related to the discussion we want to have with this model. And we inject it as the latest layer so that we make sure that the first information that we see is from there. So this is one of the things that we can do. The other thing, it might be, for example, to oblige the model to read some information before using the previous knowledge. So, for example, there are retrieval augmented system where basically we can put our documents, PDF, and so on, and we can ask to the model to reply to our questions by looking at those documents before any other type of knowledge. So it's a good way also to filter the knowledge. Then there are other techniques that I will not say they can customize in some way the model. I will not say that is a full customization. So it's basically we can train the model in real time with some examples so that we make sure that how they reply will be in the same or similar structure of our examples. But this is something that usually will not stay on the long term.
So would you recommend that if somebody were to go with like a private instance of a popular AI engine, that they also consider having a team that could potentially program some of these customization? Is it really important to maximizing the use of AI today? Is that a recommendation, or is that just in case you want to do something that's outside the standard?
I would say it depends on what you want to use, or better, why you are using those models. If it is for general knowledge and you are not feeding the model with information that you cannot deliver outside of your company, in that case you don't really need a specific technical person to use it. Probably you will need a specific technical person to build an infrastructure. Like if you want to go to do more than just ask to a model something, and you want something that is more complex, like report or anything that is automatic and so on, yes, you will need a technical person. For sure, if you want to use a model inside the company with data that is protected, and especially if you want to protect the company by attacks, this is another thing that usually people don't talk a lot about that, but however, there are a lot of models that are exposed out there. so they can enter from the model and see the data. In that case, for sure, you need a technical team to help you out.
Actually, that leads me to asking like a different question from a different angle. So, you know, if we have women in tech, right, our communities, women who are in tech, some of them are technical, some of them are less technical, some of them have been already like in the industry for a long time. If there's the people who are asking themselves, okay, I'd like to get more involved in AI, I'd like to work for those divisions in my inside my company or aspire to in the future, then the next question would be, do I need to be a programmer? Do I need to follow certain courses? What would be your recommendation to women in the tech field getting more familiar on how they can be proactive in the AI field, basically?
Well, we are in a time where we don't need to be like 100% technical to understand AI. So I will say, of course, if you can code it even better, because you can basically be proactive in building some stuff. But you don't need to be technical 100% to make sure that you can do the difference in the discussion in AI. Because, of course, first of all, you are the user. So your voice is really, really important. You can raise concern about privacy or usability. You can also say, okay, there are some features that I would like to see. So you can basically build new features with your ideas. There is also a big part of everything that is related to responsible AI and ethical AI, which is something that is it's a concern for everybody. You don't need to be technical. You just need to make sure that you can observe and be proactive and say, okay, this is something that might be wrong. So I will say, if you are not tech, you can work a lot in improving AI by being critical, by just observing and raise your voice.
That's good. I would also like to everybody, do not be shy. If you have some more questions, please share your questions in the chat or in the question tab. We're here to answer your question. But you talk about ethical AI, and that's definitely something that I really wanted to get into, and we can come back to some of these other questions afterwards. You participated in this UNESCO paper about ethical AI, or the use of artificial intelligence in an ethical manner. So can you tell us a little bit more about this and the contents of this research?
Okay, so basically, one of the last paper was about, as you said, the realm of AI and gender. So in this paper, basically we describe what are the challenges that we are facing right now. Yeah. And there are a lot of them, but especially is the way that we are building policies for AI, which is good, but sometimes it's also hard to make sure that inside the policies themselves, we don't propagate bias. So, for example, one of the things that we did was to make sure that in the policies we have a representation of the genders, because I mean, words are very important, especially because words are the way we express how we see the world and the concepts that are in our mind. We also see that basically when we think about AI and biases, we have a lot of issue into different areas. It might be, for example, for everything that is related to the healthcare. The majority of studies are done with samples that are male samples, and then the cure is applied also to women. Are we sure that the medication is acceptable also for women? Because we don't have data, we don't have research probably. So how we can do that? We know also that if we think about, for example, jobs, and jobs also in AI, we have a gender gap, and the gender gap is also in research position, which is horrible, because we do research, but we are missing the point of view of the different genders. So we are in some way, without even thinking about that, we are increasing the biases. There is, when we think about, one thing that really, I would say almost hurt me, was one test that you can also observe in the website of UNESCO. When we search about on the net, school boy, we will see a lot of images of schoolboys going to school and so on. When we search about schoolgirl, we will not see only schoolgirl images. We'll see other type of images. And I think not only it hurt me, but also you can imagine that those type of data is the data that we are feeding into the AI system. So we are basically, again, feeding the bias inside the models.
Right, because the AI is only as good as the data that it's capturing, correct?
Yeah, exactly. The data is essential. The AI is the action, but the data behind is what it makes the difference.
And so what are some of the possible solutions, or as a user of AI, what are some of the things that we need? Obviously, to be awareness is really important, but how do you see change, or how do you see that we could potentially have a more ethical use of AI?
Probably.
More control. So through policy, I guess, regulation policy. Is that the only way?
To say again, let's be human and not be machines. Let's observe and raise our voice. That's the rule, I will say, number one for everybody. If we are technical people, for sure we have the skill, but we have also, I would say, the duty to make sure that what we build has been assessed in terms of discriminatory processes. So, for example, make sure when we use any data set, let's make sure that the data set is representative of every single point of view that we are analyzing. As a user, for example, there is a beautiful document that is called Ethical Impact Assessment by UNESCO. And it's basically a real, like we can say, sort of a manual that you can use to make sure that when you build a project, or when you are a user of the project, you ask the right questions to yourself and to your team to make sure that the project, first of all, is the AI project something that, is it really useful? Should we use AI to do the project? Because sometimes we are, especially right now, we want to use generative AI everywhere. Is it always necessary? And then how we can make sure that people can use that product and understand, even if they are not AI experts. Because one of the biggest points discussed in those frameworks is basically we all have control. We only need to take 5 minutes to understand the tool, the limits. Even without the technical knowledge, we have the control. We should, when we are not feeling in control, we should require that kind of control so that we can be responsible at every step. So I will say we have a lot of power. We have a lot of frameworks that can help us. More and more policies around. They are just starting, so we will see a lot of improvements and updates, but this discussion is going on. So we are in the positive part of the history.
Some common question: what data is used to train the model, right? And then, while using those results, keeping that understanding also. I guess this is where you mean that we maybe have a little bit more control. But things
Let's
evolve
be
fast,
critical.
right? Things evolve fast. So we'll see how things evolve. What are some areas where you see that AI is actually? There's a question here. Let's get to this question before my question. Do you think that facing these bias issues in AI will also lead to more policies around ethical web?
That's a very good question. I will say, honestly, right now we need to create policies for AI because, however, AI has been used a lot and sometimes also without control. A good policy, however, is done for society. So I will say that we should see some movements also in the ethical web. The only thing that I'm concerned is that ethical web maybe has not the hype that right now AI has. So
Okay.
it will be a responsibility from also the users to say, hey, we also need those kind of policies right here.
Right. So, what is the best way, I guess, to promote ethical AI? What's the best way to go about it, basically, outside our organizations or, within our community?
I would say let's stick to resources that are well known with a lot of knowledge behind and checks and controls and so on. So for sure, I will say UNESCO is one of these resources. Let's not be afraid of having some discussions that might be in our families, it can be also in the workplace. Let's listen to the others' opinions, because sometimes you will discover that There are some ideas that are totally wrong, and the only thing is that there is not enough knowledge. Again, as you said, everything is going so fast. For sure, we are talking about bias. I have the bias that I've been working in AI for a long time. So some things for me sometimes are like obvious, but then when I talk with people, I can really see that the fear that I perceive is dictated by the fact that they are learning so many things at this pace that it's easy to get confused, though, just to don't have enough time to make the right connections. So let's discuss about that. Let's be open. Let's be critical. I think it's essential. Let's be critical every time that we use a tool. Let's make sure that we use our not artificial intelligence to be critical about what we see, and always try not to replace the human with a chatbot. I'm a little worried about that because I see there are some proposition about doing social media with only one person and a lot of bots. That's a big challenge.
What would be your final words or your final piece of advice to our community, women in tech community, about AI?
To explore without judging and without having too much fear, but being 100% critical. And see, instead of AI as a potential enemy, see how you can use AI to help to support your journey.
That's
Oh, I see.
very good final words. I really like the idea to explore, to try, not to be so scared, but to try to dive in, to dive into the water, right? Maybe with a floater device at first, and then you could go do, different types of exploring. So thank you so much for your time today. Your insight was very good. And we're definitely happy that we had a chance to have a webinar with you today. So thank you, Stefania.
Thank you for this opportunity. And if you have any more questions, I'm on LinkedIn, so you know how to find me.
Yes, exactly. You can find Stefania on LinkedIn. Stefania Pecore, everybody. Thank you very much.
You pronounce so well.
All right. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.